The moment he pulled the trigger, time stopped. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. The smoke from the revolver coiled like serpents in the dry air. And through the dust, standing among the cracked tombstones of Fort Sumner, Pat Garrett saw Billy, not as a corpse, but as if he'd never died. Billy smiled, that same mocking, crooked grin, stained with blood and memory. "You forgot me, Pat." The voice didn't come from beyond. It came from within, inside his skull, inside his soul. Garrett didn't answer. His hands trembled. His fingers still rested on the trigger, but he no longer knew if he was aiming at a man or at himself. Before we ride deeper into this grim tale of the Old West, leave your mark in this desert. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stoke the fire, because this story is just getting started. The August wind whistled through the adobe ruins. Fort Sumner was nothing but bones and dust, a forgotten scar on the map. Pat Garrett rode in on a weary horse, his eyes hidden under the brim of his hat. The past coiled like a snake in his gut. 7 years had passed since he pulled that trigger. 7 years since Billy the Kid fell into the darkness with a hole in his chest and Pat's name on his lips. 7 years of dirty fame, cheap headlines, politicians fawning, old women spitting in the street. 7 years trying to sleep without dreaming of that damn kid smile. But that morning, something had called Garrett back. Not a letter, not a man. Something deeper, like a scent or a premonition. The fort's entrance was a broken arch. The walls, eaten by time. And on the stones, fresh boot prints. Recent. Garrett dismounted slowly, each movement heavy as lead. Inside the fort, a shadow moved too fast. It looked like a man, or a memory. He drew his gun on instinct. Who's there? No answer, just the echo mocking him. Then he saw it, on the wall, scrawled in charcoal or dried blood. "You didn't kill me." His heart tightened. Memories surged, hot and bitter. That night, the dark room, Billy unarmed. The shot in the dark, the silence after. Garrett stumbled back. The fort spun around him. The image of the dead man smiling, growing more vivid. Something had returned, or never left. And its name was vengeance, or madness. He didn't know which. Not yet. Garrett spent the night by the fire, eyes open, revolver in his lap. The flames crackled low, but it wasn't the fire that lit the old hunter. What burned was inside. Billy had appeared 3 times, in the shadow of a dead tree, in the warped reflection of the canteen, and finally, right in front of him, leaning against a rotted post, chewing an invisible toothpick, as if time had never passed. "You gonna run, Pat, or finish what you started?" When the sun rose, Pat saddled his horse and rode toward Lincoln, not by choice, but because the tracks pointed that way, the same ones he'd seen in the fort. Someone was playing with him, or something, and Lincoln was the last place Billy had been a man, where Pat was still just a sheriff, before they became legend and curse. On the way, he stopped at Chavez's abandoned ranch. The door was open, thick dust coated the floor, and in the center of the room, a portrait, carved with a knife into a pine board. Billy's face hollow-eyed, teeth bared. Garrett spat on the ground. "If this is a trick, it's a good one, but I don't play with ghosts." At the Roswell Inn, an old woman recognized him. She covered her mouth, as if seeing a walking corpse. "He passed through here 2 days ago." "Who?" She hesitated. "Billy." Garrett said nothing. He turned his face, unblinking. The woman's words echoed in his mind like footsteps in a grave. Billy the Kid was dead. Garrett knew. He'd felt the cold body, buried it with his own hands. And yet, there were tracks. Every town he passed left a trail of wary glances and whispered rumors. "He's back. He hasn't aged a day. He's laughing out there, like hell let go of the reins." Garrett rode faster. More than hunting someone, he needed to prove to himself he was still in control, that his mind still belonged to him. But deep down he knew this journey wasn't for justice. It was penance, and the final destination, a name that refused to die. Lincoln, where it all began, and maybe where it would end. or begin again with blood, dust, and a ghost smile. Lincoln welcomed him like an open grave. Gray wooden houses, windows boarded from the inside, dogs silent, the kind of quiet that listens more than it speaks. Garrett rode in, carrying himself like a man already riding inside his own tomb. Everyone stared. No one spoke, as if they saw in him something more than flesh and bone, as if the stench of the past still clung to his clothes. The saloon was open but empty, only the sound of the old piano playing itself. At the back table, a man, lean, hat tilted low, a matchstick between his teeth. Garrett stopped at the door. His hand brushed the revolver's grip. He felt the familiar weight of steel, but didn't draw. The man raised his face. It was him, or someone who wanted to be him. The features were Billy's, young, sharp, mocking. But something was wrong. A glint in the eyes that wasn't human. Too still, too cold, empty as a haunted painting. "You got old, Pat." The voice came like an echo from a grave. Low, mocking, but still a good shot? Garrett didn't answer. He took a step. The floor creaked. The piano stopped. Time did too. The stranger smiled. But the smile was from another world. "You killed me in that room. Remember? Said it was for the law." Garrett's head throbbed. His hands sweated. His vision flickered between the saloon and that night. The oil lamp, the shadow, the shot in the dark. Billy unarmed. Billy defenseless. But who really killed who, huh, Pat? The figure stood. Tall, imposing, more shadow than flesh. "Since that night, you're the one who's dead. You just forgot to fall." The floor trembled. The saloon's walls seemed to bend around them. Garrett closed his eyes. But the voice kept on inside him. "Call me a demon, if you want. Call me guilt. Call me memory." The figure drew, fast as only the dead can. Garrett fired back on instinct. 2 shots, smoke, and the figure vanished as if it had never been there. Only the overturned chair remained, and a phrase burned into the mirror behind the bar. "I'm still here." Garrett fell to his knees. He wasn't bleeding, but he felt pain. He no longer knew if he was hunting a ghost, or if he was a specter, wandering a west that forgot to die. And now, Fort Sumner called him back, where Billy was buried, or where they pretended he was. If there was an end to this madness, it would be there. The moon hung crooked over Fort Sumner, pale, watching, like it was waiting for the end of a play it had seen before. Garrett dismounted in silence. The earth crunched under his boots. The old cemetery lay ahead, framed by rotting planks, crooked crosses, and the promise that some dead don't rest easy. He came alone. No witnesses. No faith. At his waist, the colt cocked. In his soul, only shards. The wind blew, carrying a familiar smell, gunpowder, leather, and deceit. The same smell from the night it all ended or began. Billy, the name slipped out like a confession. That's when he saw him, standing over his own grave. Hat low, shirt open, and that same old smile. But there was more. It was him. And it wasn't. His skin seemed woven from shadow and dust. His eyes, bottomless pits. In his hand, a revolver that didn't belong to the world of the living. "You came back," Garrett said, voice breaking. "You brought me," the figure replied, stepping forward. "Every time you remembered, every time you denied, every time you told the story your way." Garrett raised his gun. His hand no longer trembled. "You're dead." And you're not. Time stopped. Again, 2 men face to face. 2 irredeemable pasts. 2 triggers ready to spit fate. Billy advanced. Garrett fired. The sound echoed across the desert like the howl of a stray dog. Smoke. Silence. When the haze cleared, Garrett was alone. The grave still there. The headstone marked William H. Bonney. Died 1881. But on the ground, in the disturbed earth, something new. A second set of footprints. Fresh. Identical to his own. Garrett looked to the sky. The moon ignored him. "You never left, did you?" And deep down, he knew the answer. The sun rose pale over Fort Sumner, as if afraid of what it might find. Garrett stood motionless before the grave of the kid he killed, or thought he killed, or wished he'd killed. The sand around was smooth again, the footprints gone with the wind. But the doubt that stayed lodged like an iron thorn in his chest. He walked down the hill slowly, his steps heavier than his body. Behind him, the fort crumbled in silence. Ahead, a world that no longer made sense. On the road, travelers would say they saw an old man with leaden eyes and a soul of sand, crossing the desert in silence. Some said it was Garrett. Others swore it was Billy himself, disguised. No one knew, not even him. Because after that night, Pat Garrett was never just a man again. He became legend, shadow, scar. They say sometimes on hottest nights, someone sees two men dueling among the ruins of the old fort. No one hits, no one falls, because you don't duel with death or with what lives inside you. The truth, it got lost with time, but the ghost, that still rides. If this story haunted your imagination, leave a sign, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which Old West legend you want to see in the next journey. We'll meet on the next trail. Stranger, but beware, some ghosts like to follow those who hear their stories.